Good evening, I'm Amna Nawaz.
And I'm Jeff Bennett. On the NewsHour tonight, a 22-year-old is arrested and charged with the murder of conservative activist Charlie Kirk, as law enforcement officials piece together evidence of a possible motive.
Tensions rise in Europe after Russia's drone incursion into Poland, prompting France and others to dispatch fighter jets and the EU to extend sanctions.
And the son of an imprisoned Hong Kong newspaper editor describes the Chinese government's crackdown on speech.
He stayed and defended his principles and defend his colleagues, and I'm so proud to call this man my father, and so proud to be able to fight for him, to fight for his freedom.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by Friends of the NewsHour, including Jim and Nancy Bildner, and the Robert and Virginia Schiller Foundation. The Judy and Peter Bloom Kovler Foundation, upholding freedom by strengthening democracies at home and abroad. The William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, for more than 50 years advancing ideas and supporting institutions to promote a better world at hewlett.org.
The John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, fostering informed and engaged communities. More at kf.org.
Certified financial planner professionals are proud to support PBS NewsHour. CFP professionals are committed to acting in their clients' best interest. More information at letsmakeaplan.org.
And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. And Friends of the NewsHour. This program was made possible by the contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. The man accused of killing conservative activist Charlie Kirk is now in custody.
The arrest came after an extensive search. The FBI had called on the public for help, posting surveillance photos and videos and issuing a $100,000 reward. As Stephanie Sy reports, it was information from the suspect's own family members that ultimately led to his arrest.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We got him.
After a massive manhunt, police have the young man they believe killed Charlie Kirk. Tyler Robinson is a 22-year-old Utah resident. The state's governor described how the tip came in.
A family member of Tyler Robinson reached out to a family friend who contacted the Washington County Sheriff's Office with information that Robinson had confessed to them or implied that he had committed the incident.
He was arrested today and is being held on initial charges, including aggravated murder. Robinson's family members told authorities that he had become more political lately.
Robinson mentioned Charlie Kirk was coming to UVU. They talked about why they didn't like him and the viewpoints that he had. The family member also stated Kirk was full of hate and spreading hate.
Kirk was shot by a sniper on Wednesday on the campus of Utah Valley University. A crowd of thousands had gathered for the kickoff of his so-called American Comeback Tour. Later, the FBI released this surveillance video that they say shows the shooter escaping the crime scene. They collected evidence from the rooftop.
Inscriptions on the 3 unfired casings read, "Hey fascist!" "Catch!"
Cox said investigators have also discovered messages between Robinson and a roommate that corroborated the details of the weapon and engraved casings.
In 33 hours, we have made historic progress for Charlie.
FBI Director Kash Patel, who early in the search released conflicting information about a possible suspect, said the investigation would continue.
This would not have been possible without you, the media, and you, the public. That's why we went so public, so fast, and we're so transparent, and we're committed to that transparency.
After giving the latest on the investigation, Governor Cox addressed the moment in broader terms.
I don't want to get too preachy, but I think it's important that we with eyes wide open, understand what's happening in our country today.
The Republican called out the political nature of the violence, which he has called an assassination.
It is also much bigger than an attack on an individual. It is an attack on all of us. It is an attack on the American experiment. Now, again,
he spoke to Kirk's followers and opponents, many of them young people.
You are inheriting a country where politics feels like rage. It feels like rage is the only option. Your generation has an opportunity to build a culture that is very different than what we are suffering through right now. Not by pretending differences don't matter, but by embracing our differences and having those hard conversations.
Well,
on Fox News this morning, the president had a different emphasis.
I hope he gets the death penalty. What he did, Charlie Kirk was the finest person. He didn't deserve this.
While political violence has claimed victims on both sides of the aisle, President Trump today said the left is more to blame.
I'll tell you something that's going to get me in trouble, but I couldn't care less. The radicals on the right oftentimes are radical because they don't want to see crime. They don't want to see crime. The radicals on the left are the problem, and they're vicious, and they're horrible, and they're politically savvy.
So close was he to the Trump administration that last night, Charlie Kirk's body was flown from Utah to Arizona on Air Force Two. Vice President J.D. Vance accompanied Kirk's widow, Erica, on the trip and described Kirk as a true friend. Kirk founded the campus activist group Turning Point USA at 18. His influence is credited with helping Trump win, and he became a close confidant to many in the White House. While his views earned him a loyal following, they also made him a target. He was often engaging in debates on college campuses, which is where last night students across the country gathered to mourn.
All we can do is pray and look to the Lord for guidance, and I think that this really will be the turning point that Charlie's been preaching and been doing since he started.
Turning point next year and even this year is going to be bigger than ever. We're going to keep his message alive.
Turning Point USA says it has more than 850 chapters on U.S. campuses. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Stephanie Sy.
We start the day's other headlines outside Chicago. The Department of Homeland Security says an ICE officer shot and killed a suspect who had tried to avoid arrest by driving his car into officers. Authorities say the incident took place in the Franklin Park suburb about 18 miles west of Chicago. One officer was hit by the vehicle, was taken to a hospital, and is now in stable condition. DHS says the suspect was in the country illegally and had a history of reckless driving. The shooting comes amid a broader federal immigration crackdown in the Chicago area. Meantime, President Trump says he's sending National Guard troops to Memphis to address crime there. On Fox News this morning, the president said the state's Republican governor and the city's Democratic mayor are, in his words, happy about the plan. Later at a news conference, Mayor Paul Young confirmed his commitment, but made clear he doesn't necessarily agree with the approach.
I did not ask for the National Guard, and I don't think it's the way to drive down crime. However, that decision has been made. My commitment is to make sure that we work strategically to ensure that this happens in a way that truly benefits and strengthens our community.
Other Tennessee officials are more critical. The mayor of Shelby County, which includes Memphis, criticized the move in a social media post, saying, "No one here is happy, not happy at all with the occupation, armored vehicles, semi-automatic weapons, and military personnel in fatigues." This week, Memphis police reported a decrease across all major crime categories in the first 8 months of 2025 compared to previous years. Missouri's Senate passed a redistricting plan today that could help Republicans pick up an additional seat in Congress. Once signed by the governor, it would make Missouri the third state to change its maps ahead of next year's midterm elections. Texas has already passed a measure that would help Republicans pick up 5 seats. California countered with a similar plan to aid Democrats, though it still needs voter approval. Opponents of Missouri's measure are trying to push back, though. They've launched a petition effort to try to force a statewide referendum on the new map. The Environmental Protection Agency moved today to stop the collection of emissions data from some 8,000 U.S. facilities. The proposal, which still needs to be finalized, would end a program that requires coal-burning power plants and other industrial facilities to report their greenhouse gas emissions. Since 2010, the government has used this data to assess the environmental impact of those sites. EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin said the requirement is, quote, nothing more than bureaucratic red tape that does nothing to improve air quality. Critics say the proposal could hurt efforts to fight climate change. Many of the nation's universities are on heightened alert heading into the weekend after a series of fake threats led schools to cancel classes and even send students home. At least 6 historically black colleges and universities have been the targets of such threats in recent days. A similar incident happened at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. At the U.S. Naval Academy in Maryland, a midshipman and law enforcement officer were injured after a false report of an active shooter caused confusion on that campus. Both are now in stable condition. The threats come amid heightened tensions following the murder of Charlie Kirk on a campus in Utah, though the FBI says there have been no credible threats so far. The UN General Assembly says it's endorsing what it calls tangible and irreversible steps for a two-state solution between Israel and the Palestinians. Today's declaration was boycotted by the U.S. and Israel. It comes ahead of a gathering by world leaders at the UN later this month, where Britain, France, and others are expected to formally recognize a Palestinian state. Ahead of that, Secretary of State Marco Rubio is heading to Israel next week to reaffirm the U.S. commitment to Israeli security. Meantime, in Gaza today, health officials say Israeli strikes killed at least 40 people, most of them in Gaza City. Residents say they are caught in the crossfire.
People are in the streets. Where are they supposed to go? Please look, where are the people going? We are exhausted. We are unarmed. We belong to no one. We are civilians.
The latest Gaza strikes come amid ongoing anger among Arab nations over Israel's strike this week targeting Hamas leaders in Doha. Qatar's prime minister was in Washington today, meeting with top U.S. officials to discuss the strike. He's also set to meet with President Trump in New York. Qatar will host an emergency summit of Arab leaders on Sunday. Nepal has a new interim prime minister following that country's worst upheaval in years. Former Supreme Court Justice Sushila Karki took her oath on live television today. She's the first woman ever to head that nation's government. Karki takes the helm after violent protests over a short-lived social media ban forced her predecessor to resign. Protesters torched government buildings and clashed with police. Officials now say at least 51 people were killed. On Wall Street today, stocks ended mixed to close out what was an otherwise strong week. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell more than 270 points on the day. The Nasdaq added nearly 100 points. The S&P 500 slipped back slightly from its all-time high. Still to come on the NewsHour, the viral images surrounding Charlie Kirk's murder present difficulties for parents and their kids. David Brooks and Jonathan Capehart weigh in on the week's political headlines. And a 66-year-old retired accountant realizes his dreams by joining a university marching band.
This is the PBS NewsHour from the David M. Rubenstein Studio at WETA in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
Today, NATO launched a new plan to improve its defenses along its eastern flank with Russia after Russia's unprecedented incursion of drones into NATO member Poland earlier this week. Also today, the Trump administration presented to Europe a new package of economic punishments against Russia designed to be imposed by both the U.S. and Europe. Nick Schifrin's been following this all today and joins me now. So, Nick, let's start with NATO's new plan. What did the alliance announce today?
It's called Eastern Sentry, and it's designed to extend from the far north up to from the top of Finland all the way down to Bulgaria on the Black Sea. The idea is to have more integrated air defense, better information sharing, and new assets. France is sending transport planes, including one that landed in Poland tonight, as well as fighter jets. Denmark and Germany will also send jets, and this will all be under the control of NATO and its top commander, American General Alexis Grinkovich, who spoke today in Brussels.
The key to this is an entirely new defense design. This is going to be a comprehensive and integrated approach, and with additional resources, we'll be able to plug gaps in the line. We'll be able to concentrate forces where we need to defend at a moment of a particular threat, and we'll have much better communication across the entire eastern flank.
Now, a lot of this has existed before, Amna, but Grinkovich acknowledged that NATO still needs to learn lessons that they should learn from Ukraine, from the war in Ukraine, how Ukraine and Russia are fighting, especially trying to create a new way to shoot down relatively cheap drones with a new version of a drone wall or something like that, rather than using billion-dollar jets in order to shoot down drones. But the fact is, Polish authorities say 19 Russian drones crossed from Belarus and Russia into Poland over 7 hours. And that is a sign that the alliance as a whole politically has failed to convince Russia that it would pay any price for this kind of incursion, argues Heather Connolly of the American Enterprise Institute.
I think it was a success that multiple NATO countries met the test, but the fact that Russia even tried this means our deterrence in some ways failed. And NATO needed to have this early century, Eastern century, 2.5 years ago when the first debris fell on Polish territory.
Conley and others see this as a major purposeful Russian incursion to test NATO planning and resolve.
Nick, even within the alliance, there does seem to be some disagreement about Russia's intentions here. What should we know about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Polish authorities have insisted that this was purposeful, citing those facts about the incursion that I said before. But President Trump said yesterday that drones could have been fired at Ukraine and then somehow diverted because of jamming.
Could have been a mistake. Could have been a mistake. I hear that what happened, as you know, where they were taken down and they went a little berserk. But regardless, yes, I would condemn even for being near that line. I don't like it. I'm not happy about it.
A senior U.S. and senior NATO official tonight tells me, Amna, that there is no definitive proof that Russia intentionally flew the drones into Poland. But there is also simultaneously no proof that they thought it was a mistake. And so, bottom line, the Poles are convinced, though. Donald Tusk, the Prime Minister of Poland, doubled down today on X, writing, quote, "We would also wish that the drone attack on Poland was a mistake, but it was not, and we know it."
We also noted, Nick, this new package of economic punishments to be imposed by both the U.S. and Europe against Russia. What is that?
So this is a meeting that happened today between Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and his counterparts from the G7, the 7 leading industrialized economies in the world. And G7 officials tell me that there's a U.S. proposal to try and punish Russia with the U.S. and the rest of the world. That is, that the G7 must immediately impose a 50 to 100% tariff, secondary tariff on China and India for their purchases of Russian crude oil, use hundreds of billions of dollars of Russian frozen assets to finance Ukraine, sanction Russian energy giant Rosneft, Russian banks, and a so-called shadow fleet of ships that Russia uses to move oil and gas, and to more quickly end the import of Russian energy imports into Europe. Earlier today, President Trump appeared in Fox News' studio and was asked his vision for how to punish Putin.
Does your patience run out with Putin?
Yeah, it's sort of running out and running out fast, but it does take two to tango. Putin is a question mark, but we're going to have to come down very, very strong.
What is clamping down on Vladimir Putin?
Well, it'll be hitting very hard with sanctions to banks and having to do with oil and tariffs also.
But here's the problem, Amna. President Trump has threatened these tariffs before and not followed through. And crucially, there is no sign the U.S. is willing to impose the penalty on China, specifically that is asking the rest of the world to actually take. And so a senior European official tells me that that is their read as well, that the U.S. isn't willing to take that step on China. And so this official sees this more as negotiating tactics than the final U.S. demand on Europe.
All right. Nick Schifrin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's turn now to real questions about how to talk about this political violence and the concerns around graphic and violent images tied to Charlie Kirk's murder that kids of all ages may have seen in the past couple of days. During this morning's press conference, Utah Governor Spencer Cox said he was concerned about what people were exposed to already.
We are not wired as human beings biologically, historically, we have not evolved in a way that we are capable of processing those types of violent imagery. This is not good for us. It is not good to consume. Social media is a cancer on our society right now. And I would encourage people to log off, turn off, touch grass, hug a family member, go out and do good in your community.
Within hours of Kirk's death, videos of the shooting had been seen over 40 million times combined on TikTok, Instagram, and X. Parents and caregivers have been grappling with how to talk to their kids about all of this. We spoke today with some parents and teens about those concerns. Here's some of what they told us.
I'm Mo Damtu. I am a high school senior from Portland, Oregon. I've got to see the video, the close-up video without any warning or anything. So it was the most horrifying thing I've ever seen in my life. The gunshot kind of came in, and just seeing the blood pour out was really horrifying. And yeah, I did not expect. I wasn't warned on the graphic nature of the video. So it was really surprising and really horrifying to see.
We saw it from many different angles. It's very graphic and it's disturbing, even for me being almost 60 years old.
It was just really hard to go online without seeing it. And I think I'm kind of desensitized to some things like that already, just because of how many times we read about things like school shootings and murders and stuff.
My name's Keith Hansen. I live in Montana. I'm 59 years old. And this is my daughter, Sarah. She's 18.
I feel like I have to step away from social media for a little bit if it's going to keep showing me that video. I still want to be able to have feelings, seeing something like that happen to somebody. And it's a little disturbing to me how I don't feel anything anymore when I see that video.
I'm Quillen Musgrave. I'm the parent of two kids aged 14 and 7, and we live in Richmond, Virginia. These kids, they have seen so much, and the things that they've seen happening and unfolding live, or seeing the aftermath of events that have happened. I don't know that this video, again, is the one thing that's triggering the most harm. I feel like it's a culmination of this over time.
I'm Carla Spears. I'm the mom of a 17-year-old and 16-year-old here in Midland, Michigan. Definitely they feel fear. They worry that their own opinions will make them targets, even if it's just bullying among their peers. I know that it makes them hesitant to really share. As a parent, I feel worried about the world that my kids are getting ready to be adults in. They're thinking of college, thinking of jobs, and I do worry about them.
To help get perspective on how to deal with this, we're joined now by Tori Cordiano, a clinical psychologist specializing in children and adolescents. Welcome back to the NewsHour. We're grateful to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
So when children and teens are exposed to a graphic video like this, what's the first thing a parent should do in response?
Well, assuming that your child or teenager has actually shared with you that they saw it, it gives you an opening to provide some validation for how they're feeling and some support. So you can start with checking in about how it felt to see that, what thoughts they had, how they're doing now, keeping in mind that most kids and teenagers don't want to spend too much time in that conversation. But what we're doing there is opening the door to let them know that this is a safe place to be talking about what they experienced.
How would a parent know if a child has seen the video if that child doesn't bring it up directly?
I think with this specific incident, if you have an older teenager, you can assume that there is a decent possibility that they have seen it, or at least seen part of it. That's not going to be true for every teenager, but this spread very quickly, and the images are very graphic. So checking in with your teenager, especially your older teenager, about if they had heard or seen anything about this, because some kids, especially slightly younger kids, may have seen it without realizing what they were looking at first, without searching it out, and then be holding on to this feeling that they have done something wrong by seeing it or by stumbling into this. So we want to make sure that kids know, of any age, if they see anything disturbing online, that parents are the people that they should be coming to talk about that.
Well, what are effective ways to help children process disturbing or frightening content they might have seen online or on TV?
So, the first thing that we can think about is to validate whatever emotional reaction they're having to this. So, some kids can feel a sense of shock. Some kids don't have a clear sense of what they've seen, if what they've seen is actually real, if it's AI, if they can trust what they have seen. This particular video is so graphic that I have heard from some kids that it almost it felt hard to even know what they were looking at. So that can result in an immediate feeling of shock. It can result in worry. It can result in fear. It can result in a delayed emotional reaction and a little bit of numbness at first. So just to know that however they are experiencing it, if it's sticking with them in a big way, if they were able to see it and then move on, there is no one way that we expect kids to act when they viewed something like this. And so we want to convey that to them, that however they're feeling is understandable and okay.
What do we know about the psychological effects on children of witnessing violent imagery, even through a screen?
It's very difficult to talk about it in terms of one specific outcome. Kids are very different. It depends on their developmental stage. It depends on their age. It depends on how much of it they've taken in and their previous history with any sort of trauma, violence, anxiety, things like that can make it harder for them to experience that. What we do know is that viewing that sort of violence for anybody, especially for kids and teenagers, it creates an emotional reaction in us. And again, that can look a lot of different ways, but we assume that especially in the short term, that kids will be affected by viewing that kind of content online.
For older kids who are active on social media, is there any practical way to limit their exposure to graphic or violent content, knowing that filters don't always catch everything?
Yeah, I think honest conversations with kids about, that they may not always be able to predict when a video like this will come up in their feed or when somebody tips their phone toward them and tells them to take a look at this thing that they're viewing. So they can't always keep themselves protected from that. That's important to say because sometimes kids can feel a sense of guilt or responsibility for having seen this, even if they hadn't meant to. Beyond that, checking in with kids about how they're feeling afterward can give them good guidance about how to move forward. So, for example, if they had a strong reaction to this, reminding them that not seeking this out more, not taking in more of this content, although they may feel a curiosity or some desire to do so, that we know that them taking steps to limit it, and that might mean taking breaks from their app, it might mean blocking certain sites or certain places where this can come up, and turning more to conversations that they can have in real time. That can be with parents, it can be with their friends. I know this is happening in a lot of classrooms in high schools this week, where we're creating space for actual conversation about what has happened.
And lastly, what are some signs that a child might be struggling in the days or weeks after seeing this video, or frankly, just living in this fraught moment?
So things we would be looking for are any disruptions to their normal routines, their normal way of going about life. So if you are seeing that they are having more difficulty falling asleep at night, if they are complaining of more difficulty concentrating or focusing, certainly if they are expressing that this is sticking with them, but kids, especially younger kids, might not be able to put that into words. Anything that tells you that their anxiety is heightened in a more ongoing way. For younger kids and even middle schoolers, that can look like difficulty separating or wanting to stay closer to home, more seeking reassurance. And then again, those disruptions to the routines that would let us know that this is still on their mind in a more disruptive way.
Tori Cordiano, this is most helpful. We're deeply appreciative. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any day now, a Hong Kong court is set to deliver a verdict for Jimmy Lai. He's the 77-year-old democracy activist and media magnate who's been detained now for 5 years. He's accused of sedition and collusion with foreign forces, but his supporters call the trial a sham and say the only thing Lai is guilty of committing is journalism. Nick Schifrin recently sat down with Lai's son.
Jimmy Lai has been detained by Hong Kong authorities in solitary confinement for 1,700 straight days. He's become a symbol of the death of personal freedoms in Hong Kong. Jimmy Lai arrived in Hong Kong at the age of 12, stowed away on a fishing boat. He worked his way up to become a media tycoon and a leading pro-democracy advocate. In the summer of 2020, he became the most prominent person arrested under a national security law that punished people not only for what they did, but also what they said. Anyone who, quote, provoked the hatred of Beijing, who called for Hong Kong's separation from mainland China, who received support from a foreign country as judged by Beijing-backed courts, could be sentenced to life in prison. And now, after a 2-year trial and 5 years of detention, Jimmy Lai's health is deteriorating, posing a grave risk to his physical and mental health and to his life. To discuss this, I'm joined by Sebastian Lai, Jimmy Lai's son. Sebastian Lai, thanks very much. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
To the NewsHour. As best as you can tell, how's your father doing?
Not very well, unfortunately, as you outlined these conditions that he's in. It is absolutely horrible. And this is a man who's 77, turning 78 at the end of this year. He recently was too sick to go to court because he had heart palpitations, and they had to hook him up to a heart monitor. You know, we're very worried that something happens to him and it just doesn't get dealt with fast enough, and he passes away.
You and I sat here in these exact same seats a year ago.
Yeah.
And you told me that you were worried your father might die in detention a year ago.
Yeah.
What's changed, if anything, or are you just more worried than you were back then?
So his trial is still ongoing. There were times when he could express, his principles in court, and it was those little beautiful moments of this man who is, through his courage, through his belief in freedom, stayed and defended these principles, and you can still see that mentally and spiritually he's still very strong, but physically it's really distressing.
Devout Catholic, fierce promoter of democracy, those are the principles that your father has lived in all his life. And this month you've submitted a new request to the UN to try and raise your father's case with Hong Kong authorities, with Beijing. What are you hoping the UN does, and what do you think they might accomplish?
So the UN could put pressure on both Hong Kong and the Chinese government to treat my father better. But look, the wider picture there is he shouldn't be in jail in the first place.
Your father's being tried for sedition and conspiracy to collude with foreign agents. Do you believe there is any chance that this court will find him not guilty?
There's no chance of him ever getting a fair trial. The evidence is incredibly thin. My father has come out incredibly clean throughout all of this, and to the sense where he has really been shown to be this moral figure, this person who always stood for what is right, who campaigned for democracy peacefully, who advocated for Hong Kong to be democratic under the Joint Declaration, and did not call for Hong Kong's independence, who did all of this because he believed it was the right thing, financially and personally for it, and in the end decided to stay in Hong Kong even after the passing of the national security law to defend his journalists and to defend his principles. And many people around the world do not think that a man who's done all of that, who's so courageous, deserves to die in prison.
One difference between today and the last time you and I talked a year ago is, of course, President Trump is in office. And last month, President Trump talked to Fox News, and he said this.
I've already brought it up, and I'm going to do everything I can to save him. I'm going to do everything. He's a respected guy. He's a good guy. I mean, you could also understand President Xi would not be exactly thrilled by doing it.
What do you hope that President Trump can do to try and save your father?
I mean, we're so incredibly grateful that the president said that. I thank him from the bottom of my heart. This is a man who has freed so many people from all over the world. The hope is that he frees my father, but at this point in time, it's saving his life, and so I really hope he saves my father's life.
As you know, I interviewed your father in August 2020, and this is my last question to him. You are, as we talked about earlier, accused of colluding with a foreign power. Are you resigned on a personal level to being found guilty and spending a long time, even perhaps the rest of your life, in prison?
I don't think about this because I don't want to put the psychological burden on myself. until the time comes. I'm not worried just because my life is about myself. It would be meaningless. Only when I detach from myself and thinking of my life is about something bigger and not about myself, that my life becomes meaningful. And that makes me going every day.
When life is not about myself, but about something bigger, that's when my life becomes meaningful. What's your response to watching that?
It's obviously very emotional because anybody that knows him is a man who had, he could have left at any point. But I think at his age, he realized that he has so much more to defend, so much more to lose, but so much more to defend, so much more to protect. And he knew that despite obviously the danger to his life, that he had something that mattered more. And so he stayed and defended his principles and defended his colleagues. And I'm so proud to call this man my father, and so proud to be able to fight for him, to fight for his freedom.
Sebastian Lai, thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me.
People are still grappling with the fatal shooting of Charlie Kirk, which raised tough questions about the political environment in this country. For that and more, we turn now to the analysis of Brooks and Capehart. That is New York Times columnist David Brooks and Jonathan Capehart of MSNBC. Great to see you both. So let's just start with the fact that Charlie Kirk was an undeniable political force, right? Had incredible influence over a new generation of young conservative men in particular. His death, you've probably both seen. I mean, former presidents have weighed in. It is being reported on overseas. I was watching BBC today. It was wall to wall about coverage of his killing and the arrest of the alleged gunman here. There's a sense, David, that this marks something different and notable in our nation. Do you believe that?
Yeah, I do. Another step. In the hours after Kirk was killed, I started getting emails and texts from my friends who are supporters of the president. And a couple of them said independently, this is our George Floyd. And they didn't mean that literally, but in terms of emotional reaction into how gutted they were. And they just felt just something really terrible has happened. Another emailed me that there's no coming back from this. And I think what they meant by that, and I had a later conversation, they see in their own lives, as I think we all do, 23-year-old young men who have turned nihilist, who just they're lonely, their whole life is on Discord or whatever, and they've turned, believe in nothing to lose, hatred. I would recommend a book to capture the moment. It just came out a week ago, and obviously it was written before the killing, by a guy named Bill Galston, who's probably been on the show multiple times. He works at the Brookings Institution. And it came out just a week ago. It's called Anger, Fear, and Hatred, and Domination, Anger, Fear, and Domination. And it's about the dark passions. We all need to be motivated by something. And good leaders were motivated by what you might call the bright passions, hope, aspiration, a vision of a better life. But people have discovered that it's more powerful to motivate people with the dark passions, like anger, hatred, resentment, and the urge to dominate. And this has been true of politicians in both parties. I had a very poignant conversation a decade ago now with a Democratic ad maker who said, I want to elect Democrats, but every ad I make is about anger and fear and hatred. And so I feel like I'm part of the problem. And the thing about the dark passions, they're imperialistic. They're like cancer. Once they get in you and in the body politic, they tend to spread. And it's super hard to turn that around.
Jonathan?
This has been a tough week.
Yeah.
The killing of someone that prominent should shock the senses of everyone. I think Governor Cox of Utah has been superb in speaking to our better angels, in trying to lower the temperature of the rhetoric, of trying to remind us of who we are as a nation and who we are as a people, and trying to get us back to being able to disagree without being, not only without being disagreeable, but without being murderous. But I don't know if this is going to be the inflection point that a lot of people wonder that it will be, because it's so heinous. The video that a lot of people got to see, whether they wanted to or not, makes this unlike anything we've seen in a long time. But I remember being on set of an MSNBC show in December of 2012. What I'm thinking of Sandy Hook. Mm-hmm. And what was so jarring about Sandy Hook was that we saw a story of not just a school shooting, but a school shooting in an elementary school with young children. We all thought, as a nation, that this is the moment that something will happen on this particular issue, gun violence. And yet nothing happened. Nothing's changed. And here we are, yet again, in a situation where we're talking about an incident of gun violence, but because of who the victim was, just in terms of our politics, but also who he was in terms of the president and this administration. Mm-hmm. This is one thing that I have to factor in to my thinking about all this when I look at the reaction from the president and his administration, that this wasn't just the murder of someone who was a like-minded person. This was family to them. And I try to keep that in mind as I watch the reaction. But I have to tell you, I am very concerned about what that reaction is going to be in the days and weeks and months ahead.
Well, let's talk about that for just a second. In terms of the reaction from the president, David, you've seen the president first say that his supporters should respond with nonviolence. He said that's what Charlie would have wanted. The next moment, he's blaming the radical left political violence. There's people around him now even suggesting that they should be deporting people who are critical of Charlie Kirk after his killing. But in the context of the country they're speaking to, just take a look at this poll we pulled up from April of 2025. PRRI asked people if true American patriots may have to resort to violence in order to save our country. Basically, what's your view of political violence? 81%, the overwhelming majority of Americans, 81% said no. They disagreed with that sentiment. Slightly more Republicans, 18%, would agree with it than Democrats at 11%. But that is the environment we're in right now. What does that say to you about whether or not we'll see more political violence ahead?
Yeah, it only takes a few, right? It only takes a few young men like the young man who tried to kill Trump, the person who killed the Minnesota speaker, and the guy who killed Charlie Kirk. But the reaction, I have to say, I've been appalled by some of the reactions, a few, including the president's. But I have to say, I've been sort of impressed on the whole. I think a lot of people in various political stripes who really disagreed with Charlie Kirk have been pretty noble about this, about seeing past politics into a human life, into a Christian, into a family man, like just seeing this is a boat we're all in. And I've seen that across the political divide. And when I've looked at the Republican reaction, the overwhelming majority has been, he was talking to people. He was talking to people he disagreed with. And that's instructive to us. There's a moment, Thomas Hobbes, the philosopher, said fear can sometimes be used for good. When you become so afraid that your society is slipping into chaos, then you're jolted out of your bad habits. And maybe this will be a moment for this. It really takes an act of heroism to get out of the dark passion doom loop. There has to be a moment of interruption where you say, no, I'm stopping this. I'm not partaking. I will respond to hatred with love. And of course, the ultimate example of this is the Civil Rights Movement, where Martin Luther King preached a gospel of love, and in an aggressive way that was going to force the sins of society into the faces of people and make them see, is this who we are? And so I don't know if this will be a turning point where people will make that interruption and halt the cycle. But so far, I felt it's been a moment with a few exceptions of coming together.
Can I just say that in your example, David, with the Civil Rights Movement and Dr. King and all those marchers, they had an ally in the president. who was there to, break the passions and to lead. And here, when it comes to what you were just saying, I am not convinced that our current president is the one who's going to be able to do that. And even though we don't have kings in this country, we have always looked to our presidents as moral exemplars, especially in moments like these, in moments of national trauma. And right now, I'm not sure President Trump is capable or willing to show that kind of leadership.
Fair point.
In the minute or so we have left, then, Jonathan, I'll just follow up. If not from the president himself, because we've seen mixed messages even in this last 2 days or so, where does the message have to come from? What has to happen to reach this inflection point you've both noted is necessary in this country?
We need more Governor Coxes. We need more people like him in high positions, especially in high positions of leadership, executive leadership, who step out and do what Governor Cox has done. If we haven't seen it fully and consistently from the president, then we need to see it from governors, we need to see it from mayors, we need to see it from members of Congress, we need to see it from the Speaker, the majority leader of the Senate. We need to see it from and hear it from leaders up and down the chain on both sides of the aisle, just to finally say, okay, look, we can't keep going down this road, because if we do, the slide that a lot of people feel that we're on will be inexorable. And I as fearful as I am praying that that leaders will lead.
Here's to that prayer and hopefully better days ahead. Jonathan Capehart, David Brooks, thank you so much.
Thanks.
At 66 years old, Kent Broussard has proven it's never too late to chase a dream. Tomorrow, he'll be marching onto the field again with Louisiana State University's famed Tiger Band, sousaphone in hand. Last weekend, he became the oldest member in its history. It's a dream that started decades ago when Kent was just a boy watching from the sidelines. After retiring from a long career in accounting, he enrolled at LSU as a full-time student with one goal in mind: to finally earn his place in the band. Now, with his dream realized, Kent's story is striking a chord far beyond Baton Rouge, reminding people everywhere that passion and persistence can rewrite the script at any age. I spoke with him earlier this week about his journey, the discipline it requires, and what it feels like to finally march to the beat of his long-held dream. Kent Broussard, welcome to the NewsHour.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
We should say you graduated already from Southeastern Louisiana with 2 degrees. You had a full career in accounting. What made you decide at 66 years old that you were going to enroll at LSU and try to join the marching band?
You know, it goes back really 1968, 1969, when I first started going to LSU games way back in the day. And the sound of the band, obviously Tiger Stadium is one of the great football stadiums in America from a college perspective. And I loved all the games and have just numerous memories about football games, but the sound of the band is what always caught my attention. And I had always put in the back of my mind that I wanted to do that somewhere down the line. I always had that plan, even though it really didn't hatch until really about 30 years ago, when I started contemplating retirement. And when I started contemplating retirement, I said one of the things I want to do when I retire is just not sit on the sofa and watch Netflix all day or just be sedentary. That's just not me. So I said to myself, I think I'm going to enroll in LSU and try out for the band. And that was 30 years ago. So as you get older, the time starts to go by faster and you start to realize that, hey, retirement is coming. And what I did was 5 years ago, in a conversation I had with my family at one of the dinners we had, I told them that my plan was to enroll in LSU and try out for the band. At the time, I don't think they thought I was serious. And I was really serious because I kept talking about it during that during that dinner. And it came to pass that they realized that I was really serious and really wanted to do this.
I have to tell you, I used to play the tuba in the marching band, and I know that marching in formation can be tough for 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds. What has been the biggest adjustment physically for you?
Well, I'll say this. Back when I was marching in high school and in college, we didn't do much marching. We would basically march out, stop, turn around, play, and then march back. That's not what LSU does. LSU is a true marching band. And so basically, in essence, I've been marching for 2 weeks. And I'm taking a crash course on marching. And the entire section, the section leaders helped me, not only from marching perspective, but also musically before I went through this whole process to get to where I am, showed me how to march LSU style, and that helped a lot. Every day during the fall semester, we're outside practicing for an hour and a half. So I had to be ready for that. And I had to be ready to carry an almost 30-pound sousaphone.
You were in physical training before your audition, is that right?
I was. I've been jogging for about 16 years. I've been jogging since I've been 50. So I put in about 20 to 25 miles a week. Second thing, I needed something from a weight perspective. So I bought a weighted vest. The most important thing I did was walk around the neighborhood for about 3.5 to 4 miles, about once every 2 or 3 days, just to get the weight of what it would feel like on my shoulder for an extended period of time.
What did it feel like the first time you performed in Tiger Stadium, and then this past weekend when you saw yourself on the big screen?
You know, it was the culmination of really from 1968. I had always looked from the outside in. It was a lot different looking from the inside out. But I will say this, looking at it, marching down the hill and really concentrating on what I need to do and the task at hand was most important. And then when I saw myself on the screen, I'm saying, oh my God, that's me. And I didn't see myself, at least initially. And I have a good time in the stands. You know, I'm there to enjoy the music. I'm there to enjoy the band. I'm there to enjoy the football game. And I was just dancing along, and there I am on the screen. And it was, as I said, it's a bit overwhelming, and I'm just very humble because of all the attention.
And how has your family reacted to all of this? You mentioned that when you raised this idea some years ago, they weren't entirely convinced or didn't think that you were entirely serious.
Yeah, I would say this. Not only were they not entirely convinced, they were laughing, right? And after I picked them up off the floor and I explained it to them, and I kept talking about it, they all said, well, I guess he is serious. So I've had nothing but support from my direct family on all sides, plus indirect family, friends, everyone, the students at school, administration. It's been, like I said, the word I keep using is overwhelming. And the family's 100% behind me in this endeavor.
Well, now that you've realized this post-retirement goal, are you in this for the long haul? Are you going to get a degree, or is this day by day?
Well, actually, you know what? This is the whole day-by-day thing. I already have 2 degrees from Southeastern. I don't need another degree. And we got to see where it goes. I would say this, too, one more other thing. This is just not about me. This is about the band. This is about the Color Guard, the Golden Girls, and the band. Because without all of us, none of this would be possible for me, and none of it would be possible for everyone else. That's an important piece of the Golden Band from Tigerland about what they stand for and the culture that they have over the years. It's one big family, and we all pull each other together.
Kent Broussard, among the newest members of the LSU Marching Band. Thanks again for your time. We appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, and good to talk with you.
Be sure to watch Washington Week with The Atlantic tonight here on PBS. Jeffrey Goldberg and his panel discuss the fallout surrounding the shooting death of Charlie Kirk and the fear of more political violence.
And watch PBS News Weekend tomorrow. The final Downton Abbey movie is out now, and we speak with show creator Julian Fellows about why the historical drama is so beloved.
I suppose, if I'm honest, there is a kind of longing for order, really. I don't know that I long for a Victorian way of life and all of that stuff. I don't think I do. But I do long for a world of order and good manners and where people are pleasant to each other and everyone stops getting so angry about everything.
That's coming up Saturday on PBS News Weekend. And that is the NewsHour for tonight. I'm Amna Nawaz.
And I'm Jeff Bennett. For all of us here at the NewsHour, thanks for spending part of your evening with us, and have a great weekend.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions, and friends of the NewsHour, including Kathy and Paul Anderson, and Camilla and George Smith. The Walton Family Foundation, working for solutions to protect water during climate change so people and nature can thrive together.
2 retiring executives turn their focus to greyhounds, giving these former race dogs a real chance to win. A Raymond James financial advisor gets to know you, your purpose, and the way you give back. Life well planned.
It really matters when you have an opportunity to give back.
Being part of something that's bigger than myself, that's what brings me happiness.
Being able to integrate your professional career with some of these other things that are important to you, it's critical to be happy at the end of the day.
You know, this is our community too, and we want to participate and give back to it.
People want those opportunities to make an impact and a difference.
And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. And friends of the NewsHour. This program was made possible by the contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.